These newspaper article readings are not for the faint-hearted or the squeamish. If you're at all sensitive, I might suggest these aren't for you. If in doubt, check the description below. It'll tell you which topics are covered in this particular episode. There's both human and animal suicides, and you heard that right. There's also horrific descriptions of injuries, as well as the deaths of youngsters. So don't do it to yourself if you're prone to nightmares, is all I'll say right now. Not all the articles are horrible. Some of them are uplifting, some of them show incredible bravery and heroism. There are near misses. So these were picked as showing life prior to health and safety, as well as for the crazy and curious details some contain with other miscellaneous happenings that kind of struck me enough to post the articles to Twitter, despite not having too much relevance to Scotland necessarily. These are worldwide topics, and they didn't have any real connection to the projects that I was working on and researching at the time. I just happened to have come across them by the way, kind of thing. So we'll get into them, shall we? What we're going to do here is we're going to do a lucky dip of newspaper articles to really mix them up a wee bit, because while I'm doing the researches, I'm obviously coming up with the same kind of terms and things. So we'll mix them up even further. So to that end, I have all of the newspaper titles and dates of the articles. Okay, a wee bit darker today apparently. I'm not sure why I couldn't brighten it up. New setup, so what does that have for us this episode, huh? A few of these left. Let's see. We have the Dundee Courier for the 2nd of February 1907. A bit of a later one actually. Okay, we're starting on a sad note here. We have the Beaufort Castle fatality. How accident happened. The husband's grief. The inquest on the body of Lady Dorothy Cuthbert was held yesterday afternoon at Beaufort Castle, Hexham. Captain Cuthbert said he was carrying the gun pointing over the left shoulder, and his fingers were very cold at the time. When he turned to fire at the pigeon, the gun did not catch in his clothing, and he must have pulled the trigger before the weapon reached his shoulder. Cuthbert Surtees, a beater, said he saw Captain Cuthbert lying prostrate with grief. A verdict of accidental death was returned, the jury expressing sympathy with the bereaved husband. And that's from the Dundee Courier for the 2nd of February 1907. Well, he certainly seems to have been very genuine in the aftermath with regards how he reacted to that death and his grief over that. I would still like to think that a full inquiry took place just to ensure that it was entirely an accident. I wasn't aware of anything further on that article to be able to clarify what happened with our Lord Captain Cuthbert here thereafter. I don't know if he remarried or anything, but if that was an accident, then that's a pretty sad accident. We'll see what the next has for us. We have the St Andrews Citizen for the 20th of August 1904. This is a strange one. It reads, "One of the great railway companies has lost a locomotive Engine sheds are being searched and every mile of the line examined from London to Cornwall, but no trace of the missing engine can be found. And that's from the St Andrews Citizen for the 20th of August 1904. How do you lose a locomotive? These things weigh tons. They're also kind of stuck in how they can travel, like on something called the permanent way, lines that don't really change. So how would somebody have absconded with a locomotive? I assume that's what they're suggesting here, is that it's not just been lost, but someone has done away with this thing. I can't imagine how you'd go about doing that. Well done to whoever created this mystery. That's a really strange one. I wonder if it was ever found. I don't think I came across anything suggesting it had ever been found. I don't think there was a resolution to that mystery. Let's see what the next one has. We have the Strathclyde Herald for the 22nd of September 1906. What's from the 1900s? Okay, a very short article, but it's not a good one. We have a dreadful railway disaster in America. 100 persons drowned. A northbound passenger train on the Chicago, Rock Island and Pacific Railway fell into the Cimarron River at Dover on Tuesday, and 100 persons were drowned. Many of the survivors were more dead than alive as a result of their terrible experiences. And that's from the Strathclyde Herald for the 22nd of September 1906. It really boggles the mind just how many just crazy accidents came out of America on the railway lines. I'll say it again. Some of their least impactful accidents rivaled some of Britain's worst accidents. Just really terrible things happening. And I don't know how much of it could have been avoided due to health and safety, due to an overhaul in regulations and in checks. And when we heard before in a previous episode that it was a driver error who felt like he could get through a culvert, a one-way culvert, before an oncoming train, then got through on the same line. He failed. But I wonder what could have been done to have prevented that. Was it an infrastructure check that was failing? Did they maybe not realise that the track was in some way deficient, or a bridge perhaps was deficient? I mean, it says many of the survivors were more dead than alive. I mean, to have experienced that kind of an accident, to have been part of that kind of an accident, the PTSD that must have been going around the survivors, I can't imagine any of them got a good sleep for some amount of time after that. What a horrific thing to be part of. Crazy to survive such a thing when so many have died too, so survivors' guilt is going to be rife amongst them. They're going to have seen loved ones perish in this accident. I mean, for such a short article, it really gives such an image of horror for these people. We'll see what we have next. Everyone cross your fingers for something a little more positive. We have the Edinburgh Evening News for the 5th of September 1904. Oh my word. Okay, well this is very much in line with the last article. Railway disaster at St. Louis. 7 persons killed, 25 injured. 7 persons were killed and 25 injured, several of them fatally, as a result of the wrecking of a streetcar by a passenger train at the Sarah Street crossing St. Louis on Saturday. The train, which is said to have been running at 30 miles an hour, struck the streetcar squarely in the centre, and the occupants had no chance of escape. The engine driver of the train which caused the accident says he was within 100 yards of the scene of the disaster when he saw the streetcar start to cross the metals. It appeared to him that it had ample time to get across, but right in the middle of the crossing, the car stopped. He immediately attempted to reverse the engine, but had only succeeded in reducing his speed to about 12 miles an hour when the engine crashed into the car. And that's from the Edinburgh Evening News for the 5th of September 1904. I assume an investigation would have taken place into why that car stopped on that junction. If the train driver felt like even at the speed he was going that the car could have made it out of danger, why was it stopped? Was it panic on the part of the driver who saw the train coming and didn't immediately feel like he could have made it safely? I don't know. If there's fault to be handed out there, I feel it's going to be on the streetcar driver who stopped and thereby incurred this accident. So perhaps we'll have a more positive one for our last article. What do we think? It seems to be the more I hope for these things, the worse the articles get, but we'll see. We have the Dundee Evening Telegraph for the 22nd of October 1904. Oh my word, what an article to end on. We have a distressing fatality in Aberdeen. Child's horrible death. Run over by electric car. A distressing electric car accident occurred in Aberdeen this forenoon, as a result of which Robert Laurie, the 14-month-old son of a widow residing at 71 Catherine Street, met with a horrible death. The child was standing with his mother on the pavement in George Street, and Mrs. Laurie, happening to turn her head, the boy attempted to cross to the other side of the street where his grandmother was standing. An electric car came along at the time, and before the motorman had time to pull up, the child was knocked down. Nearly 5 minutes elapsed before the child could be extricated from below the car, the wheel of which had practically cut his body in two. The remains presented a sickening spectacle when they were removed from underneath the car. Much sympathy was expressed with the mother, whose husband died only recently. That's from the Dundee Evening Telegraph for the 22nd of October 1904. Oh, when you hear that it's a 14-month-old child of a widow, that instantly tells you that she's recently suffered a bereavement. Within the last year, probably, her husband has died. For that to then follow on as an incident for her, I don't know that anyone can really wrap their heads around how she must have been feeling. And it was to see his grandmother. He was literally running to a place of safety. I think the reason that I picked out the article at the time was also for the fact that he had been killed by an electric car in 1904. And you don't consider that people were driving something we consider to be especially modern. It was, I think, Ford who monopolised the market with a cheap-to-produce automobile that unfortunately ran on petrol. And they cornered the market, and so we didn't see electric cars for another century, near enough. But that's a pretty terrible article to bring that kind of information to light. What a way to end. Like, we don't have that many articles left. So I have all the hope in the world that we have at least half as many positive articles as negative coming up. So we may see you for the next one. Take care.